What's up, guys? Today I'm joined by Dylan Lefavour, a former TCG world champion who now is in the Pokemon card business, partnered with friend of the channel and someone who I've interviewed before, Jake from Pokenomics. First, can you introduce yourself to my channel, who you are, and maybe give us a little bit of background of your journey in Pokemon?
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Dylan Lefavour. I have been involved with the Pokemon community for like 21 years now, ever since 2004, I think. I played the TCG all growing up, and I never really stopped. When I went to college, I took a step back from competitive play, and I kind of got into like my first little taste of like the more business side of Pokemon. My family ran the regional championships in New England for 3 years, from 2014 to 2017. So that was definitely cool to be a part of, even though I was too young to really like take a huge leadership role in it. And then from there, I sort of got into the TCG business in 2020-ish. I didn't really think too much about selling many aspects of my collection or anything before that. When it went up a whole lot in 2020 and 2021, I started looking at it more seriously. Um, my normal job after college, I worked for Activision Blizzard for 7 years. So I have a background in like esports business and analytics. And then in 2024, I went full time and I partnered with Jake. And now we run Pokenomics. If you ever talk to the Pokenomics One with the one at the end account on eBay, that is us. And you're usually talking to me.
Okay, cool. You glossed over a very cool fact about yourself, I feel like, in your history, is that you are Pokemon TCG champion, I believe for 2008. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
What was that like? When did you start actually getting serious in the TCG? How many tournaments do you have to win? Like, what is the process of that? Because I'm not really into the playable side of it at all, so I don't really know any of it.
So I like to separate TCG history into like two eras as far as competitive play goes. And the split is really when they started making regional championships the focus of the competitive circuit. That was around like 2012, 2013 when they um, started to transition from like doing one regional championship day per year to doing multiple. And I think they started in 2011 or 2012. I think 2012 doing a fall and a spring regional. And then it kind of just regional sort of just grew from there. Now they do regionals like every other weekend is a regional in some part of the world, and people travel around the circuit to compete. And this is just some background on like how competitive works and how it was different from when I played to how it is now.
Mhm.
Back when I played, it was just like one regional, and competition was a lot more regional centric. So you could pretty much just play in your region, and you could potentially earn a world's invite by just competing well enough and doing well in a certain number of events. And that was the environment that I grew up in. I don't really like the traveling every other weekend for competing in Pokemon and frankly usually losing money traveling. Like that's not really the business that I'm in. Like Pokemon is a negative hobby for 99.9% of people, and it's just a handful of people who like go positive doing it, and even a lot of them probably would just do better working at McDonald's if like opportunity cost like is
Yeah.
the only factor, not enjoyment. um so I competed as a kid. I lived at home, and my parents were very, very helpful, helping me get places and compete, very encouraging. I kind of got serious around 2006, 2007. I like was playing against people in my area, and I'd play against the same people a lot of the time. And I didn't do as well as them, and I wanted to do as well as them. So I started seeing my first real success in 2008, actually. I started winning my first tournaments and with my Blissey deck in the fall of 2007. And then in 2008, I was like way more serious. I picked up the Empoleon deck when Majestic Dawn came out, and I think I won like almost all of the Battle Road tournaments in the spring with the Empoleon deck. And then I went to US Nationals, and I think I made top 32 in my division. And then I actually just won Worlds. It was the next tournament. I mean, I was probably the best Empoleon player in my division.
Where was Worlds that year?
Orlando.
Okay, cool. And you're
Yeah.
from kind of the Northeast area?
I am originally from New Hampshire, which is where I am now. I do not live here anymore, but I am visiting home for this particular weekend. I've been traveling
Gotcha.
a lot in the last couple of weeks for a TCG business, so I haven't really been to my home state in almost 2 weeks now. So ready to get back home, but
Yeah.
US first.
So you mentioned that there's a lot more regional tournaments and there's a lot more traveling nowadays than there was when you were that kind of sucks because I feel like the barrier of entry is a lot higher for people now. You have to pay
Financially,
all
it
that money to
definitely
travel.
is. Yeah, I mean, you can even see this in like the age divisions. Like there are like almost as many as almost 2,000 people who compete in certain championships now in the Masters division. But like juniors and seniors, like sometimes there's barely 600 people who play. Back when I played before the regional split, the divisional ratios between juniors, seniors, and masters, which is like 10 and under, teenagers, and like 16 plus. I think it's the same way that it was then that it is now.
Okay.
But there's way more younger people who play Pokemon. Though that aspect of the player base hasn't grown very much at all. Granted, a lot of those people grow up and they age out and they stick with Pokemon, and then everybody pulls into Masters, which is great. But like, you still don't see the same amount of like younger people coming in, which I think is kind of a shame. Granted, like you can only fit so many people into a particular regional space. So Pokemon probably wants like the highest spenders, which are Masters. They have jobs, like they spend more than 10-year-old in their like regional, their event spaces. So it's good for Pokemon financially, which translates back into the player base. But I'd really like to see more younger people play. I think the regional split has definitely made the game a lot more inaccessible. And it's also just like, it's not what I grew up with. I don't really want to be traveling and like away from my family and my house and my business to do that. Like I took up the game again in, I think, what was it, 2023 now? I played in like NAIC and Hartford regionals back when I lived in New England. And I mean, I did pretty good, but it didn't like reignite the fire. I was a little disappointed by that, but that's okay. A lot of the people that I grew up with are starting to play again and like re-fall in love with the game, along with so many other people who have re-fallen in love with Pokemon in the 2020s. So
yeah, that's cool.
good. It's chugging along.
How old were you when you won the tournament?
13 or 14. I was 14. I just had my 13th birthday in July.
That'd be huge at 13 years old, winning.
I was 14, but yeah.
Oh, 14, yeah.
Yeah, close enough. I mean, I grew up a lot playing the game. Like I definitely was I got kind of an ego after I won, even in my own division when I was playing with younger people. And the senior division is frankly less competitive than Masters, and it always has been. I actually say that my favorite accomplishments were in 2011 because on my 2010 season, I aged up to Masters. So from 2009 to 2010, I was immediately playing with like way, way better players. I was playing with the best people in the world now. And I just didn't have that kind of practice. I was playing with like Con Lee and Alex Freza and John Bristow and like all these other people from the New England area that were really good people, like really, really good players. And maybe there are a couple of people in your audience who know who some of those people is.
Probably.
The challenge went up exponentially, and I did really bad in 2010. And usually or a lot of the time, people who do really well and they age up, a lot of those people just stop playing because they can't compete on the same level they're used to, and it's really disappointing for them. Especially like when you're so young, like you're competitive, the thing that you're really competitive about, or the thing that you make a huge aspect of your life, it can't not like become a really big part of your ego. So it's really, really discouraging if you're successful when you're young at your one thing, if you just can't have that level of success anymore. So I pushed through that in 2010, and I had a really good 2011 season. I think it was third, fourth at U.S. Nationals. They didn't do a playoff, so like you don't really know which one you were. So I was third, fourth at U.S. Nationals, and then I made top 8 at Worlds in 2011, and I won my first regional in 2011 too. So
awesome.
I was really happy with those accomplishments and my consistency that year, and that kind of kept me going until I went to college, and I realized that I can't split my attention between Pokemon and college and still have success in both. So I took a step away from it, and I was happy that I did that.
Okay. And one of the things now, do you go to Worlds now? Do you try to get out to different World Championships now?
I went to Worlds in Honolulu last year, and that was really fun. My fiance and I turned it into a little bit of a vacation, so she got to see Hawaii for the first time, and went to Honolulu with some of our other friends too. So that was a really good experience. We spent like 2 days at Worlds, and the
That's
business is
awesome.
really good at Worlds. Like,
Yeah.
let me tell you, a lot of people should be going to these NAIC and World levels events because there aren't a lot of Pokemon TCG business people who go to them.
Yeah.
And the people who do make a lot of money. So I'd recommend trying to go and make connections and buy
Interesting.
stuff. Like even
Yeah.
those signature posters at Worlds, they have one over there. Like those can pay for your trip. So they're not that hard to get.
Yeah, that's cool.
The tip.
Was it similar? What are the differences now that you feel like you see when you go to a Worlds now compared to what Worlds was like in 2008? Is it way bigger?
Way
Uh,
bigger. It's
eh,
not even close. Yeah.
yeah,
Like the amount of people who go to World, like even the Worlds in Honolulu, which I thought would be less attended than it was, just because it's kind of an inaccessible location.
yeah,
Like those people couldn't fit into the ballroom that they held Worlds 2008 in. It was not even close. Worlds is just massive now, and it's
yeah,
like massively more competitive. The community is also like if you're a top level competitor, you know most people, but you're probably mainly talking to your play group. But like back then, you could like have a relationship with all the competitive players, and you knew like almost all of them. Um, yeah, it's a
and
way
now
different
it's
environment,
yeah,
and it's way more like back then. I think it was like more personally, you were kind of close knit personally, and with the people in your region. With when you like when you practice for Worlds, you wanted to like keep your secrets
mhm,
because those little advantages can like mean a world championship for you or your teammates. And now it's like people have these like teams and practice groups where they like practice with people from all over the world rather than just people in their region. So people definitely have like a more globally um, stratified friend network now, I think, where back then it was like way more regional, the people that you hang out with.
I can imagine a lot of the practicing in 2008 was probably a lot of in-person practicing versus
Oh
now
yeah, we
you
didn't
can
we
go
didn't
online
have
and play.
we had nothing like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Was there a lot of people trying to buy your trophy card off you in 2008, or is that a fairly new thing too?
I think the only person was Dave Person,
Mm,
and I
okay.
still had his Merrill Lynch business card with his phone number on it. I think it says like I always buying Pokemon or something on it, and I still have it. I just kept it this whole time because like he's somebody everybody knows still.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I've only gotten like a few offers on my card over the years, and I still have it.
No,
Um,
that's cool.
Steve Aoki DM'd me a few years ago, and back then I thought it was pretty cool. But like he gave me this super low ball, like kind of
Aw.
disgusting 2015 era offer on my card. So I wasn't super impressed
Yeah,
by
no
that,
thanks.
considering that everything had 10x by that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still have it. Not don't
So
really intend to sell it anytime soon.
yeah, that's
Wants
super
to come
cool.
over to offer me like life-changing money for it. And as you get older, the what you define as life-changing money tends to just keep going up, and nobody's been able
Yeah.
to get there yet.
Yeah. So one thing that I think is really cool is that you as a competitor, your deck was printed, and now you're one of probably very few people in the world who have cards out there that have your printed signature on them, which
That Mew
is
Gold Star is my whole legacy. Okay, I'm the reason that exists, and it's not from Dragon Frontier set. So if you have
yeah.
a Mew Gold Star and it's got a silver border, that's my name on it. And there are a few people who have those, and I get messages on Instagram maybe like every month
Oh,
about
really?
somebody who's like found my cards or something. Not necessarily the Mew, but like one person really early on when I had like 50 followers on my Instagram account, she DM'd me and she's like, "Your like cards are the reason I got into Pokemon." And she had this whole story, and that was actually really cool. I like that one message in particular was really neat considering I had so few followers at the time and nobody knew who I
Yeah.
was. So
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, my friend does eBay Live, and he was auctioning off a card that had your signature on it, and a bunch of people in the chat were like, "Hey, that's Jake's business partner," and he's like, "What? I met this guy, and whatever collect the kind. I can't believe this is his signature."
on eBay
Um,
Live, that's cool.
yeah,
Small world.
exactly. Yeah,
Anyway, all those sealed decks have the Mew Star in it, and you can grade that card, and it's like worth 400 or 500 bucks in a 9 and like over 1,000 in a 10, I think, a lot of the time. So sometimes
yeah,
people
that's
sell those
awesome.
decks for really cheap because a lot of people don't realize the Mew's in there. So another tip if you ever find
Yeah,
those.
another hot tip. Oh, that's really cool. Trying to think if I have any other questions about the TCG side of things. I just think that's really cool. I've never been to a Worlds. It's definitely an experience I'd like to go to. I kick myself for not going to Japan. I've been to Japan a few times, and Worlds in Japan would have been really cool.
They'll
But
probably do
yeah,
it there again. I'd be surprised if they didn't. They've definitely tried to make Worlds a more global experience. I mean, I think I don't even remember the exact first time they did it outside of the US, but for the vast majority of Worlds' history, it's always been in the US. So I think
'cause
it's pretty neat that they try to make it outside.
they did 1 year in London, right? Was that
Yeah.
fairly
Yeah. They
recently?
did London, they did Yokohama. To be honest, I really don't like, I could tell you like all the cities from all the worlds that I went to, but after that, it kind of gets a little
Yeah,
fuzzy, to be honest.
that
So
makes sense.
there's so many worlds.
Um,
Vancouver, I think Vancouver was the first year in 2014, and then 2015 was Boston. And ironically, being from New Hampshire, I didn't actually qualify for Worlds in 15 because that was the first year I kind of took off.
mm. So there was a point in which you kind of, well, you said in college you kind of took a step back from the actual TCG itself. Were you
Yeah.
still collecting during that time, and not playing, or were you just like totally done in college?
So like a lot of my personal collection came from like what I just got as a kid. I didn't really sell anything. Like a lot of
Mm,
people would finish a year and then I don't know if you know how like rotation works, but like say just it's not this simple, but like say they usually release 4 sets a year,
mhm.
and basically they like you can play the most recent 2 years of sets. So like from 3 years ago now, after Worlds, like the last 4 sets from way before rotate out, so they can't be played anymore. A lot of competitive players would just like dump their cards from the previous rotation for pennies on the dollar because they didn't even want them. Like I can't stress like how few serious players back then cared at all about the value of the cards or even the cards themselves. A lot of them they were just like what's the word, game pieces to
Mm,
those
yeah.
people. But I kept most of them. I didn't really see a reason to sell them really. Um, so a lot of my collection came from that. I wasn't really like a serious collector or anything until I got in college, and I was like, I can get like these Skyridge and Expedition and Aquapolis cards, like in PSA nines. Like I learned what grading was, I think, in like 2017. And I was like, I can buy these cards for like $50. Like I never was able to have these cards as a kid. I remember, so I'm actually very nostalgic for the E era because I started playing in 2004, and on the shelves at the time were like there was some WotC still, and there was a lot of E series because they did just come out. And this is a pretty down period for Pokemon, 2005 to 2006. Like those were the dark ages. Like competitive players didn't even know if they were going to like keep holding worlds every year because so few people were interested. Um, so I would like open packs of Ruby, Sapphire, Sandstorm, Dragon, like a lot of hidden legends. And occasionally I would get like E series cards as a gift or something. But the E series cards were like way underpowered compared to the Nintendo era cards. So I didn't really want them,
Mm,
but they just kind of were like kicking around in my collection the whole time. And as I got older in like the 2010s, I realized like, wow, a lot of these cards are really cool and have really cool artwork on them. Because I was starting to appreciate the cards for something that isn't just like power level. And
mhm.
I'm like, I really wish I had more of these cards. So I started just buying them in PSA 9s. I was trying to do like an Aquapolis and Skyridge PSA 9 set. So I got a lot of those, and I started collecting collecting seriously, whatever that means, really,
Mm.
in like 2017, 2018. And I mainly went after nines, like gold stars and stuff. I was kind of thinking about investment value of cards back as early as like 2013
Mhm.
because Tropical Beach. Tropical
Yeah.
Beach was like a really playable, really kind of tough to find card in that sort of time frame. And I made some side money renting out my copies of Tropical Beach to players. So I'd let them rent them for a tournament for like $20, which was actually kind of a lot of money back then for like TCG players. But they needed Tropical Beaches for their Blastoise decks in
Yeah.
2013. Like you got to get those beaches. Skyla searches for it. Like your Skylas aren't very good without Tropical Beach. So I was renting those out, and I was like, there's money to be made in Pokemon. So I started seeking out gold stars and like just like chase cards at the time, and I just wanted to sit on them. I would trade for them, whatever. I picked up a lot of my what ended up being PSA 9 gold stars around that time. And I was grading a little in like the late 2010s and pretty casually collecting. And then in like 2020, 2021, I kind of became more of a business thing. Like the values went up so much. I'm like, my price memory is too strong with these cards. I can't just be buying them for collecting anymore. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me. It's too much money. So
How
hopefully
do
that answers
you
the question in a really long roundabout way.
Yeah, yeah. how do you square prices nowadays? I'm sure, you have price history from however many years of.
Impossible. It's
Yeah,
really,
so
really tough. And I look at like the Moonbryon. Like I've seen this like Mewtwo Gold Star go from like $50 to be worth over like 3,000 in a PSA 9 now. Is it that much now? I know it's over 2,000 now.
yeah,
But
it's
like I've
expensive.
held cards this whole time that are like that. And that card is like so much more rare than the Moonbryon and so much harder to find in a good grade. And yet it's worth like the same ballpark. It's really tough for me to justify purchasing those huge chase modern cards, even though like clearly the demand is here for them.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really tough to justify from a value point of view. And like people say this ad nauseum too, like people who are like, I guess, older collectors, investors, players, speculators, whatever. Um, like you've heard it a million times before. It's tough to like value cards like that as highly as some of the chase cards that are just so much rarer and harder to find, and in my opinion, like better looking. But like that's a matter of taste. It's a matter of
Yeah,
what you want. It's a matter of when you get into the game. Like I understand people who value those cards the way they do, but just not me.
yeah, yeah,
Sealed is tough too. Like seeing sealed stuff go up as much as it has like Scarlet Violet stuff has just been printed. Like seeing some of those sets be on par with like XY sets is just like is nonsensical to me. But again, it's a supply demand problem, and my taste
yeah,
isn't the market's taste. And you know,
yeah. I do you also have trouble buying that Me Too Gold Star, or is it more like, does it make more sense to you so you're willing to spend a little bit more on that card and it doesn't bother you as much?
so there's some of that, but there's also just the way Jake and I look at buying cards. It's just like a numbers game. It's like some combination of what percentage can I buy this at, and how quickly, and at what percentage can I
Hmm,
sell it at. And it's like a matter of how liquid the card is, which is just like the third number. Um, it's a lot easier
okay.
to buy the Mewtwo Gold Star at 80% when I know I can get like 94% with the current eBay coupon or something. Like that's a
Yeah,
really easy purchase for me. Like I can pay even more than like 80% for that card. No problem. I mean, it's the same with the Moonbryon too, but that's just a matter of like liquidity. Like Jake and I don't invest in cards. We buy them and we resell them. We're dirty resellers.
churning. Yeah,
So it's a matter of getting the margin. How quickly can I make it? And like how much work do I have to put in to make that margin? Like I can make 50% or way more buying like $1 to $5 cards and reselling them for 10. Like we can get collections with those cards in them. But
yeah,
like that's going to cause, I'm going to have to, how many $5 cards do I have to resell to make the same amount of money that I would get for making 10% margin on the Moonbryon or the Mewtwo Gold Star? It's like it's
yeah.
way easier just to do the higher value card.
Yeah, I guess for that, it's just a difference in how much capital you actually have to work with, right? Because like you might have to put in a little bit more work while you have less capital to grow that capital, but then once you have that capital, you can
Sure.
do those big,
Yeah. I
those big
mean,
card
having
plays.
having money initially helps infinitely, of course. Also, like those cards don't come to you at those percentages very often, too. I think
Yeah,
it's really tough to build a business on like reselling those huge cards. You need to take, as a reseller, you need to take whatever comes to you and be able to work with that. Um, And I mean, we've grown our business a lot. That's actually something I'm kind of grappling with now is how do I handle those low dollar cards
mm,
when every single day is just working on managing stuff that's worth more than like $50. Like when am I ever going to find time in my life to deal with $5 cards?
yeah,
I'm becoming time gated, and that's something I call it being time gated when
yeah,
like, yeah, I could do more business if I had more time, but I don't have more time. So there's like this tail end of all these collections that we buy. It's like the low dollar stuff that just like it comes to us in collections, and or maybe we're into it for pennies on the dollar. But like
yeah,
that's great that we like have that much margin available to us if we want to sell that card. But like when am I going to have time to sell that card? So that's something I'm trying to deal with now.
well, and I'm sure it's good to be in a position where you're buying collections, and most likely you guys are profiting on a lot of those $50+ cards, and then you have like a whole inventory of lower cost stuff
Yeah.
that even if it sits, it might appreciate in value, or but it's not hurting. I guess it's just kind of chilling.
Yeah. Yeah, we sure are. I mean, I'm not complaining. It's a good problem to have, but
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's tough to deal with. Consignment helps a lot with stuff like that.
oh
Like
yeah,
people like Z and G and Dan, they're great for that stuff. for sure. At least the graded stuff. My main problem I'm talking about right now specifically is with the raw stuff. I
Yeah.
think there needs to be some kind of consignment service that's like Troll and Toad Evo, but just like way better than Troll and Toad Evo. Um, that's something I'd love to like work on someday. I don't think anybody's doing it, and there's like a huge market need for it, where you can
Yeah.
just like send stuff to this consignment service and not have to deal, like you just input your price like you can on Troll and Toad Evo, and not have to like upkeep it like you have to do with TCG Direct and all that. So if anyone wants a great business idea, I think that is one. There's a lot of challenges with that too that I've glossed over. So
Yeah, I think a lot of live streamers nowadays, those that 50 and under is like kind of sweet spot for a lot of like eBay Live,
yeah, for sure.
whatnot people. Like that seems to be an avenue where you get that churn, that fast turnaround. And usually you don't lose all that much, I don't feel like, but maybe. I don't
No,
know.
I mean it depends on the card and it depends on the
Yeah.
streamer, you know, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great
So
liquidity outlet. The amount of liquidity outlets people, Pokemon collectors and investors and business people have access to these days is just unparalleled. Like there's
yeah.
never been this much liquidity in the hobby before, and I definitely don't want to be sitting on my hands. I want to be moving cards while the liquidity is really good, because I don't think it's going to be this good forever. Pokemon's
Yeah.
become a lot more cyclical, and I think we're going to have more down periods and more up periods and all that. But
Yeah, I agree
we're
for
booming.
sure. Yeah. We can at least in the position to take advantage of it when the boom happens now. So that's nice. But so you mentioned that you partnered with Jake in 2024, you said,
Yeah, like spring, late spring.
and you were doing Pokemon business stuff prior to that. You said in like 2021
Yeah,
or 2020
yeah,
ish.
yeah. I did eBay. I had a pretty big Troll and Toad Evo business back when that was a thing. Mainly those two avenues. I wanted to kind of be as hands off with it as possible. So a lot of the raw stuff went to Evo, and then just eBay reselling. I mean, I went to some local shows, but back before 2020, like national shows weren't nearly as big of a thing. So that was kind of a new experience I had with Jake too, because I'd never really done a huge show before.
Okay.
But yeah, it wasn't new to me or anything.
Gotcha. So with your the partnership that you have with Jake, what I guess how do you guys split labor? Do you guys kind of collaborate on all the different parts of the business, or do you take some part of it and he takes some part of it, or is there? I find partnerships interesting because there's
We
a part of me that's
definitely,
like, go
partnerships
ahead.
are hard. I mean, Jake was a really great match. I imagine like you need to find somebody if you're looking to partner with somebody who has like a complementary but like opposite skill set from you. We definitely don't like split labor equally. Jake does most of our buying, and I do most of our sell side stuff. But like, I'll buy collections if they come to me at good margin, and he'll like sell stuff. He does shows on his own, and he has connections that he wants to sell to sometimes, and I often end up following through on those deals. But we do a little bit of everything. I mean, to me, it doesn't really matter how much you work as long as like the value that you're at is there. Like I think Jake is one of the like the very best buyers and negotiators in Pokemon. Um, and I'm like very analytical and organized, and uh, the business needs all of our skills at the same time. Just buying cards isn't something that's unique to Jake, but like I feel like the margins that he gets them at are so good. It's like, why would I want to work with anybody else who's doing this?
Right,
I could
right.
do it myself, but then I would have to like deal with the difficult people that come when you're buying collections on Facebook. Like, frankly, the margin that I would make on stuff I'm buying and selling myself wouldn't be as good as the stuff I'm buying and selling with Jake, because he's just getting it for a lower price. Like, even if he's getting like 10% lower than I would if I were buying it myself and negotiating it myself, like that's not 10% that I'm making in theory. Like
Yeah.
that's really, really good. Like that's great work by a partner that I'm working with. Like I'm
Yeah.
happy to work with people who have different skills than my own.
Yeah. And it's cool to have a partnership too, because I feel like with partnerships, you're both equally as motivated to want to grow the thing, and you guys will both see the same or similar, benefits from it growing, which
Yeah,
instead of just being an employee to somebody, where you just work or
yeah.
whatever, that partnership is cool.
That's one thing that Jake and I like are very focused on when we like deal with other people or like think about dealing with employees or other partners, like is incentives. Like that's one great thing about ownership. I mean, unfortunately, there's only so much ownership that you can like give away as incentive. But like, if you're both owners and you're both financially invested, like you both know that each other are going to do the utmost to make sure your business is a success. And it's not just like in reality, like seeing that follow through on. It's just like a trust thing. Like you don't have to worry about it if you know the other person is like financially motivated. I feel like people almost always act according to their incentives. So yeah, I mean, if you have a partner that's incentivized the same way that you are, then you can rest easy knowing that they're going to try their absolute best, and you know they're trying their absolute best and not working against you or working on the side to like undermine you or what have you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really an important piece of mind to like be incentivized, like have the same incentives as your partners.
Yeah. So do you guys mostly buy and sell raw right now, or do you guys grade a lot, or?
So if you're like at one of our shows and you see our tables, it's almost always like so many of these cases are like mid-era raw. I love raw cards. Raw cards move great. The people who buy them are awesome. They're not like hustlers and like these broy people who deal with like Mario Pikachus and stuff. Not like everybody's like that, but there just tends to be like a lot more fun in raw cards for me. Frankly, I think there's a lot more margin to be made on raw cards. Like there's a lot of subjective aspects of a raw card. Like, is it near mint? Is it like LP? Like you don't have a grading company that's telling you all these things.
Yeah.
And like there's negotiating you can do around those things. I guess to throw like a gaming analogy in, like there's more skill expression in like buying and selling raw cards to me than there is in buying and selling slabs, where like the market is so like well established and like relatively well like the data for slabs is relatively well organized and available.
Yeah.
So there's more like ability to negotiate and deal in bulk and all these like advantages that you can find if you're dealing in raw compared to slabs. Slabs just don't move that well for me at shows. Maybe it's just because I don't have like a huge abundance of them. But my slab case is almost always the worst case. It's like I can bring all this value in these slabs, and the table real estate almost never pays for itself at Collecticon. So I'm thinking I maybe just don't even start bringing slabs at all. Like slabs are pretty rough for me at shows. Like they sell great online, and like all of those like data analytics, like alt and card ladder and all that stuff, all those things work in your favor greatly when you're selling online. But yeah, at shows not so much. Like you'll definitely see us dealing way more in raw.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because I'm almost purely slabs at this point, and I will echo your sentiments though. Selling slabs at shows, not great, not great.
But like, so where do you sell mostly?
Mostly eBay.
eBay, like, do you use eBay Live?
I don't. I partner with someone who does
Just
eBay Live for
yeah,
raw,
I mean,
but
slabs are really easy on eBay for sure. I mean, slabs are good, but I'm just saying like all of our in-person business almost at this point is just raw cards. Raw cards are a lot harder on eBay because people kind of use the same advantages that you have in buying raw cards against you on eBay. Like there are a lot of anything other than near mint is tough.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
the fun.
fine.
That was a funny thing when you mentioned that, kind of the subjectivity of it. In my brain, it was like, I don't want that. But from a buying perspective, I could see that subjectivity is nice because there's more wiggle room. But for me, it's like if it's a 10, it's a 10, and I can sell it. And if someone complains about it, it's a 10. You know, that subjectivity is gone, and it makes that transaction easy.
You'll never get the 10 at 50% of market.
That's true. Yeah, because it's more established at that grade.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And both businesses are fine. I just at shows especially, I just really enjoy dealing with raw. Like I can have the conversation about the card, like the condition of it. Like it's sometimes it's more work, but I think it's more fun.
Yeah, it does seem like more, I would say maybe end consumers, like collectors, are buying the raw cards at shows. And like you said, more the business guys, the flipper guys, are buying, large quantities at a percentage of slabs and stuff for their streams. And
that's fine too. Like we do a ton of wholesale business to a lot of those people. It's just like the people I want to interact with at shows, like kind of selfishly, is like the more fun people. Like I want to talk about like people's collections and like see what they have and what they're looking for. Like I want to talk to the person who wants all my Whooper cards because they're a Whooper collector.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That's fun. I like
those are awesome interactions.
Those cards because it's like it's a win-win. Like I get to get rid of my Whoopers, but I'm getting rid of them to the one person who appreciates them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I agree with that. How do you determine what you're going to bring to a show versus what? Because I always fear that, and it's happened many times, is I bring inventory that's online to a show, I sell it online, bring it
It's
back
real
from the
tough.
show, and now it's like, oh crap,
It's
I sold it at the show.
a huge pain to
Yeah.
do that. I actually made a big mistake at one of our first shows. Like Jake and I were experimenting with doing exactly that.
Mm.
And like even as of like 2 months ago, like there are still things listed on or there were. I think I'm finally through them all. But someone would occasionally buy something, and it was like I could tell it was like an old picture. So I'm guessing it was from like before Collecticon Dallas, like from last year, just based on the background that I used at the time. And we just didn't have the card, so I had to like refund the buyer and apologize, like saying this in a more professional way, but like I'm an idiot. I sold this at a
Yeah.
show. I didn't take it off eBay. My bad. And then I have to cancel the order, and like then they complain, they have a bad experience. Like you want everyone to have a good experience. I don't want to have to do that,
Yeah.
but I don't do that anymore. So I tend to not bring online inventory to shows hardly at all, just because the amount of lift that it takes to convert inventory to online from online to in person is a ton of work. Unless you're like, I guess you're a business that is like properly tracking it all, like maybe you have like barcodes on your cards or something. I'm not at that point yet. And plus Raw does just does so well at
Yeah.
shows. I have like plenty of, ideally everything would be online, which is what me and Jake originally wanted to do, but it just didn't pan out that way. We're not that efficient yet. We're only two people. So
So when a show is coming up, do you split? Do you have like these boxes are inventory for shows, these boxes are listed, or how do
so
you?
I manage all of our eBay stuff. So all the eBay stuff is with me. I don't live in New England anymore. And
Mm.
when Jake and I first partnered, I lived in New England. So that's been a new challenge that we've had to deal with this year. And we haven't fully figured that out yet. But so far, it's working okay. We've also stepped back a little bit from shows this year because Collecticon's very expensive,
Mm, yeah.
and our sell through wasn't always enough to really justify doing it. I try to justify show expenses based on how it competes against like what I could do online just selling. So I really want to get at least more than 80% for my cards after all the expenses and travel expenses and discounts given to buyers to encourage sales. Like after all that's taken into account, I want to at least do quite a bit better than I would just selling online. And there were some shows last year that we did that achieved that goal, and others of them didn't. But this year, we're going to be a lot more refined about which collecticons we go to.
Okay.
Um, and to your point about, or to your question about picking what goes at shows and what doesn't, I mean, we're so raw focused and like binder focused right now. It's like it's pretty easy. I don't have all that much raw cards listed on eBay right now. It's like definitely very slab heavy because we bought a massive slab collection
Mm,
like about around a month ago. We traveled to get that collection, so my focus has definitely been on slabs. um, so right now it's kind of stratified. Raw goes to shows and slabs go online, but it's not like a rigid difference between them. Like if it makes sense again to start bringing a ton of slabs to shows, then we'll do that. If it makes sense to start listing the raw stuff online and just focusing on online sales, we'll do that. Um, so yeah, it's evolving always.
okay. Cool. That's yeah, awesome. I guess I have a couple questions that I'm going to be asking everyone that comes on this month for these interviews. What was like a recent like knock it out of the park play? Like you guys bought a collection or you bought like a card or something and graded a 10 and did really well on it or something like that. What was like a knock it out of the park play? And then after that, I'll ask you what was a play, what was a not very good play.
So the most recent collection that we bought was like a very high value collection. Like say it's like a Mewtwo Gold Star or Moonbreon level. Like if you're gonna take one card and extrapolate it to like a whole collection, like it was one of those. It's like a bunch of very high value stuff where you like maybe make lower margin, but you're making quite a bit of money per margin, like
Mm,
or per sale.
yeah.
Um, so it's not just like flipping out a bunch of raw cards. It's like a reasonable amount of work. I mean, it's a ton of work to process because it's a huge collection, but the margin is so good on it. It feels really good to be like realizing those high value sales.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you give us like a highlight of like what was one of the really cool
So
cards in the collection?
So like there were a lot of like techno and sparkle tops cards. I
Oh,
posted on my
cool.
Instagram. I think it was a sparkle Charizard. I haven't sold it yet. It's still on eBay.
Nice.
But stuff like that. It's like we were getting that stuff. There weren't that many comps for them. Like it was like fairly easy to negotiate the prices to be where we want them. And turns out there's a lot of like latent like demand for those cards like lurking under
Mm,
the surface because they really don't come up for sale very often.
yeah.
Um, so those were one aspect of the collection that was definitely a home run. We did really well on those, or we are doing really well on those.
Awesome.
And it's funny because we were using fair numbers to comp them, but there were just so few sales that like we were able to price them high, and people are buying them because they just want the card so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that in particular, that aspect of the collection to me was the biggest win. Um, Also, I've been buying from like sometimes you find like online auction houses or like marketplaces, auction houses that just like don't get that much traffic compared to
Mm,
like Fanatics and eBay and all that.
yeah.
Like Rare Candy, like places like that that are see a little less traffic. Like, you can find really good deals on those places. Um, I bought a few cards from like Misprint, which is like I think it's Ava's platform. That's pretty
Oh,
new.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some good deals on there. It's just like a lot of those deals get scooped up right away if they're on eBay though. So it's like looking in places that aren't always looked at.
Yeah.
I get some consistent wins on it. It's definitely slower. It's not like business making buys or anything, but it feels good to just like find like a play that's lurking under the surface and just like be able to just buy it and make pretty relatively easy money by just knowing the comps.
And
Um,
that's a very similar thing. You know, you can do that with cards too. Plays
yeah,
that
for sure.
like looking basically where no one else is looking. So everyone's looking at modern right now. Maybe you look at, reverse hollows from Sun and Moon or something that just nobody's paying attention to, because those plays are there as well. And
Yeah.
when you
So
buy stuff that's down instead of stuff that everyone wants, that's when you can, yeah. So
yeah, I would say no. I don't know if there are any like specific big misses, um, but like stuff like that is great on paper, but
mhm,
sometimes you'll find that, or not you specifically, just a general you, like the lack of liquidity kind of crushes you in the end. Even if
true. Yeah.
you're on paper, you see a 50% margin, like this is great, I can double my money. But how long is it going to take to realize that? Like, um, selling, sometimes you can sell that stuff in bulk, but if it's like not popular enough, then literally nobody wants it. And you're just kind of stuck
Yeah.
with the bag, even though like on paper it looks good. There are occasionally, if you pick up like very like less liquid cards, you can get sort of rocked on that stuff. So
Yeah. When
um,
I first started the whole flipping, grading, and selling, I bought a lot of like mid-era Japanese. And mid-era Japanese at the time had pretty good margins, but the liquidity was like nothing. It would
yeah,
take, 6 months to a year for a 10 to sell on eBay. So it was like, well, you're getting really good margins, but the turnover is super slow on it. And
yeah,
they're pretty hard to come by. Your pile of grades to not grades is pretty imbalanced.
yeah. I mean, with those niche cards, it's like you see a sale and it's a high sale, but maybe there's only one or two collectors of these cards out there in the whole world.
Mm,
Like, and maybe there are more, but maybe there are only one or two people willing to pay that price for them.
mm,
So those comps on those illiquid cards, you can't always trust them.
yeah,
And I mean, sometimes it's tough to buy cards like that because the buyer wants close to the comps, but you're just like, this card's really niche. It would be pretty risky for me to buy it, even if it's quite a bit under the comps. It's like, as a business, can I take that risk? Because maybe that last sale, maybe that was the only person willing to pay that price for this particular card at that point in
yeah,
time. You don't know if there's another buyer out there.
yeah,
But like for the Moonbrown and the Me Too Gold Star that I keep going back to, like those, you'll find a buyer for those cards, no problem.
yeah, yeah. It's those cards I really like. I just personally really like them, but that doesn't mean that there's going to be sellers for them. And now, the last couple of years, my business has been 95% modern now. I just transferred over. I was like, you know what? I can't have stuff sitting for 6 months to a year. I need to start buying a bunch of stuff that's going to sell within a month, like
How do you
of
feel
putting it
about
on eBay.
having having that much money like sloshing around in modern stuff? Just because it moves so quickly, that's kind of my anxiety with dealing like really heavy in modern.
Yeah.
Because if I'm buying a Moonbreon, I feel like I have to list it and sell it like immediately. So that immediately is going to be the thing that I just need to sink my time into when I pick up modern cards. Like this is the thing that I have to list and just dump it because the risk for us is like we're not trying to invest in cards, we're trying to flip them mainly as quick as we can and make the
Yeah.
biggest spread on the buy and sell price. But with modern, it moves so quickly. Like if the market shifts downward, then you can your whole margin just evaporates.
Yeah, last year there was a waifu boom in Japanese where all the waifus and the ponchos and everything spiked real hard for about a month and then they came down immediately.
Yep.
But during that time, I definitely bought some cards that came down probably right back where they were. I remember the Dark Phantasma Pikachu, the one with the trainer where the shadows coming through. It's the character rare, I think in Lost Origin or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um, that card spiked to like $25-$30 because it had a trainer on it and it was a Pikachu, and then came right back down to like $8. And I sent a bunch of them in for grading. And that was a huge miss at that time because of how quickly volatile that went up and down.
yeah.
So yeah, it does definitely happens with modern. And um, but I'm definitely more of a I do lower cost PSA 10. So a lot of the stuff I buy is like we're talking about kind of like $5 to $10, and then I'll grade it and sell it for like 50, and
Mhm.
then I make a decent percentage and I just, churn that type of stuff. So I don't do a whole lot in like super high end stuff, but yeah, it definitely scares me to be leveraged so heavy. That's why I don't like the idea of holding modern sealed boxes, because if I feel like the first thing that's going to be impacted in a major market shift is all these people that are holding all of these boxes. um,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like to your point about the ponchos and wives, like I feel like there's always a bubble going on in Pokemon somewhere.
yeah.
Like I was very fortunate when this is like a less talked about thing, but I think there was a pretty big bubble in Japanese Worlds promos
Mm,
about 2 years ago now, and I've kind of always been a collector of that stuff, and I have a bunch of them. And the Japanese cards were really easy to grade 10s, but a lot of people weren't grading them. So like the 20, just for as an example, the 2016 Worlds promo, the Japanese one, it peaked at like 6K, and I think the 6K sale was mine on Fanatics. The 2016 Worlds card, and like months before, I was buying Worlds cards for like under $1,000 for the whole pack. So there was a great margin to be made
oh wow, yeah.
on buying and grading those Worlds cards because they were very easy to grade, the Japanese ones especially. But that was a bubble. Those went up way too fast. And naturally, when something goes up like that, more people grade them, more come to market, the demand gets filled, and the price goes down.
Yeah.
Um, so it happens with everything, you know?
Are you guys mostly English in your buying and selling, or do you get a lot of
Definitely.
Japanese stuff?
Definitely. I mean, um, so English stuff, I feel like we can move at shows and online, but
Mm,
Japanese stuff, I'm almost always just moving it online.
that
It's
shows
a
it's
lot more
rough, yeah.
restrictive. It's really restrictive selling Japanese or buying Japanese stuff because you pretty much have to resell it online. You'll get occasional sales in person, especially or
Yeah.
if you're like the person who does Japanese, like the Japanese collectors in person who just come to your table.
Mhm.
But if you have like a couple Japanese cards mixed in, like you really need to find the person for this card. And it's tricky, but yeah, much more English for sure. It's just way more liquid. I mean, we'll buy anything that comes our way if the price is right, of course. But
Yeah, especially
Japanese are
at
a lot more
local
limiting what
shows.
to do with it.
At local shows, I'm primarily Japanese for basically everything, and so I'll have like 5 binders of Japanese, and people will walk up and be like, "Oh, is it all Japanese?" And I'll be like, "Yep," and they'll just walk away. And it's like I get that question all day, every day. Is it all Japanese? Is it all Japanese?
Yeah.
Now I still do decently, but if they were all English, I would obviously do, probably much better, especially in raw.
hmm
But
I personally collect some Japanese. Like, I really like the cards in Japanese that just look way better than their English
mm,
counterparts, particularly like the black and white and XY era, like full art cards.
mm,
Huge
yeah,
fan of those, and the texture difference between English and Japanese is just amazing. Like the Japanese ones just blow it out of the park. They're so good and they're way cheaper. Harder,
Yeah.
they're easier to grade, like significantly easier to grade. But if you just want a 10 that looks great of like Plasma Storm Lugia, the Japanese one is a bargain compared to the PSA 10 of the English one. And I think they just look way
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we might wrap it up here, Dylan. I appreciate you very much for hopping in and chatting. I think you have a really interesting background and story, and your business right now is popping off and super cool. And I really appreciate you dropping some knowledge and helping out my viewers. And hopefully they learned something. I learned a lot about competitive play and everything, and I really appreciate it, man.
Sure, Java. Yeah, anytime. It was a pleasure.
Let the people know where they can find you on Instagram or anywhere.
So pretty much the only social that I do is just Instagram, and it's Dylan Lefavour Pokemon is my Instagram account, and that's where you can find me. Our eBay is Pokenomics1 with the number 1 at the end of it. You can
Awesome.
find us there
And
too.
will you be at any upcoming Collecticons or shows?
That's a good question. I actually don't think I have anything planned right now.
Okay.
I was gonna go to Fort Lauderdale, but something fell through, which is part of why I'm still in New Hampshire right now and not minding my business at my
Gotcha.
home. So yeah,
All right.
I'm definitely going to be at NAIC probably in Louisiana, and I'm going to try to go to Worlds if I can too. But
Awesome.
as far as the collectors and where you can find me, kind of up in the air at this point. But
Okay.
we'll see.
Well, thank you very much, Dylan. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.